I am an ambassador with the Davis Phinney Foundation, and often people reach out to me with some questions and suggestions. And she wrote to me that her husband is still driving. However, she's very concerned now because he was driving his car and coming to the home, but apparently his foot slipped from the brake to the gas, or he just got confused and he took out their garage door. And she's becoming more and more concerned about his ability to drive. She's also concerned about his mental deterioration and how to bring it up to him without a challenge that would be just very depressing for him. And as well as that, she'd like to speak to his doctor, but he doesn't want her participating in the session, or even if she can participate, she would probably have something to answer to if she brought it up without his consent. So she needs a way to talk to her husband and tell him it might be past time to give up driving. So I have that question that I'd like to bring up to Mark. And what are the words? What do we do?
That's probably one of the most challenging questions or issues I deal with in my clinical practice. And that is the question about when to intervene when you're a person with Parkinson's or Alzheimer's disease or other conditions that affect thinking start to become a problem, and you notice the issue, the care provider does, and the patient does not, or is not willing to. So there probably isn't one answer to this. There isn't one way to do it. But I think that there are some guiding principles about how you go about this. And I think first and foremost, and we've talked about this many times on this in this group, is that your concern as a care partner has to come from a real place of concern about the person. And that has to be communicated upfront and directly. And the conversation has to start with, I'm concerned about you. It's not about control. Maybe ultimately it is, but you can't lead with that. You really need to come from a place of, I'm worried about you. I'm concerned about you, whether it's for your physical safety or your mental safety or emotional health. It's really got to start with, I have concerns, and let me tell you about them. I think it's important to choose the right time and place for this conversation. This can't be done in a hectic environment. You've got to, it's got to be quiet at a time when you've allotted enough time to talk about the issues at hand. And I think you need to use compassionate language. You need to be able to say, listen, I've noticed you've been having some troubles and I'm concerned about you. I want to talk about an incident that I saw yesterday. You seem to be having more difficulty remembering what we've planned for the day, and it's starting to concern me a little bit around the issues of driving. I noticed that you had some trouble getting into the parking space the other day when we were driving into the grocery store. I want to talk about that. And what do you think about that? I have concerns about your safety and your ability to drive. So really starting the conversation from a place of real caring. I mean, you have to feel it. This can't be about like, I need to have this conversation with my person with Parkinson's and I need to get it out right now. It's got to be the right time, the right place, and it's got to be under the right emotional state. So you really do need to prepare yourself to get into that place in order to have this conversation or any difficult conversation around anything that's behavior that you feel represents a safety concern. Ultimately, you want to avoid things like blame and criticism. You want to be very caring about this. You want to take it in a way that suggests, I have concerns about you. And what should we do? You engage them. You involve them in the decision-making process. You don't say, and so here's what I'm going to do. You say, what should we be doing about this? Or what do you think the next steps should be, and engage them. And then you need to listen to them. You need to stop, full stop, and listen.
But, Mark, let me jump in 1 second, because I think one of the thoughts here is that, the person, okay, we're dealing with complicated, a lot of times, listen, I know some of you on the call are dealing with a parent with Parkinson's or possibly a child with Parkinson's, but most of you, it's a spouse or a dear friend or a partner. So I'm going to refer to it in that way, is that most of us have complicated, long-standing relationships with our person before they were diagnosed with Parkinson's, right? And so I think there also needs to be some accounting for how you normally communicate, and then how the communication has changed, and and try to keep it so that it's understood that you're in it together, right? But do you think that the cognition deficits that occur with Parkinson's don't allow the person with Parkinson's to understand your intention or my intention? Let's say it's my intention. Let's say I'm trying to have the conversation, that my intention is misunderstood because of Parkinson's and the changes in their brain. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. And we have a term for that. It's called anosognosia. And it's the inability to recognize one's own failures or deficits. And this happens in people who are experiencing neurodegenerative diseases like Alzheimer's disease and even Parkinson's disease. They can't recognize that they are not at the same level that they were before. It's part of the brain disease. It's part of the condition. So yes, absolutely. What you're describing is a real phenomena. It's they don't understand because they can't. They don't have the capacity to do that anymore. And this is something called lack of insight or anosognosia. It's something that severely affects your capacity and your capability to do things that you used to be able to do. So that's what makes some of these conversations difficult. It's not just because your person with Parkinson's is being difficult or doesn't want to hear or thinks you're controlling them. They just don't. They can't.
Yeah.
They can't understand it.
Right.
And that's where you need to be a little more creative around how you have these conversations. And again, if you come at it from a perspective of, I care about you, you're the most important thing in my life, I want to make sure that we address this properly. I want to listen to you. Let's tackle this head on and we'll solve this together, can get you better traction at going there, even if they have difficulty understanding what it is.
Pat, do you have something to add to that? Because you have lived experience in this.
I just recently had this conversation about some, the cognitive stuff that I was noticing. And of course, like what you just said, Mark, was that, we have or maybe it was you, Connie, that our relationships have been long and complicated and not complicated and everything, but we're used to speaking in a certain way in a conversation. I learned real fast when I was having this conversation about cognition that I needed to edit my approach to just exactly what you were talking about, to make it that it's something that I care about. It's something that I want you to be safe with. I couldn't tell you what it was right now. But I think it was mostly about the what's going on in the day, forgetting, different things that we're forgetting. And it goes, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, but that's key word there. Is you said you want her to be safe.
Right.
And I think those are the other real key words to start the conversation, as Mark is saying as well, is, I'm coming from a place of, I care for you. I don't want you to get hurt. I mean, one of the lines in our household is, you're only one fall away from being really unhappy, and that's where the safety comes in,
it was both ways. I was on my bike ride yesterday and my buddies wanted to go do something crazy. And I said, well, okay, that sounds like a lot of fun, but I'll go this way because I have to make it home.
Because we as care partners have to be safe too. So yeah, I make a lot of decisions like that, Pat. You and I share that for sure.
But my conversation ended up, fortunately, it ended up in a good place, and we made it through it. But there was a lot of editing going on, making sure that I said the right things and that she understood where I was coming from. So it turned out to be a good conversation. I did have one question on Neuro Psych tests for people with Parkinson's, Mark, and that's, what is the typical length of time that those tests take?
Well, it really varies depending upon who you see. So if your movement disorders neurologist is doing the assessment, they can do typically brief assessments, screening measures, which might take 15, 20 minutes, something like that. They'll do it during a routine movement disorders visit. And most movement disorders neurologists are very adept at this and are very capable of these things. The more detailed neuropsych assessments that you go to a neuropsychologist for typically last several hours. It's not all testing. I'm not running people through tests the entire time. I spend a good 45 minutes just talking with the patient and family members. I get a good detailed history. And because of the way that we're reimbursed, we have the luxury to be able to sit with people for 2 to 3 hours and do very, very deep dives into psychological, emotional, mental health sorts of issues that a movement disorders neurologist does not, because of the reimbursement, the way that things are structured. So they've got 30 minutes with your patient, with your person with Parkinson's, and that's it. And they say goodbye. I've got a couple of hours, and so I can do a really deep dive, and I can really get in there and know about things. The actual testing itself is maybe an hour and a half, where I'll spend doing memory tests, tests of thinking, paying attention to things. But most of it is probably talking with the patient and family about what's going on, what are your concerns, how can we help, how do we inform where we're going to go next? Because the assessment's just a small piece.
And hey, Pat, let me interrupt just to say one thing that we learned at the leadership conference, which I wasn't aware of, from the neuropsychologist Joanne Hamilton. She provided actually the group with a number of medical codes
Mm-hmm.
because she said, one of the people asked, well, I had to pay for a neuropsych eval out of pocket. How do you get it covered? And she said, you need to make sure, and this is important, to ask your doctor this, to make sure that it's billed under your medical condition, not a psychological or emotional health condition, right? Do you have that experience too?
Yes. Yeah, it's true. And it's different the way the different insurance policies are structured. But yes, in general, you want this under a neurological condition, not a mental health or behavioral health, if you can.
Yeah. Okay. So that's just a point I wanted to make. Yeah. Go ahead, Pat.
Well, that was a great point, because Sydney's having that exam on Monday. Yeah, next Monday. And there's a couple of reasons why I asked the question. Mainly because she asked me to ask. And then the other thing is we're going to be going from there to Portland for a neuro. We're meeting up. We have a consultation in Portland with a neurosurgeon. Anyway, but during that conversation, during that process, there you'll be able to help the patient, whether whoever the patient is, decide. This would be a good place to decide where should I be driving, should I not be driving. What kind of changes in my expectations should I be taking as a person with Parkinson's and as a care partner in guiding that.
And isn't it also, Mark, would it also be, it's fair to say that if someone presented that in front of you, then you can help advocate for whether or not, what their capacity might be or what further testing might be required.
Yeah, absolutely. So within a neuropsychological evaluation, I can get some idea about how someone might perform on a road test, for example. But I don't do road tests. I don't test someone's direct ability to drive a vehicle. That can only be done basically in a car and on a street setting through your DMV or through their private institutions that do road tests and do driving evaluations. I would recommend that if somebody has concerns, that you go through one of the private institutions first, rather than go to the DMV. You don't want to show up at the DMV and say, I'm concerned about my person with Parkinson's, put them in a road test right now, because that triggers all sorts of mandatory legal sorts of things. So I would take them, if it were my person with Parkinson's, to one of these places, an independent place that does driving evaluations and give you recommendations. They typically do it on a closed circuit in a parking lot that's set up or a closed street area, so it's safe. But they will give you direct recommendations on, listen, based on what I see here today, I don't think you'll pass a DMV driving test, or I think you're fine to drive and things look good to me. But at least then you've got some sort of official capacity. My wife doesn't like driving with me. When we're on the freeway traffic in LA, she's like, oh my God, get me out of this car. So there's always going to be challenges. But what you really want is an official opinion. A neuropsych evaluation is not going to tell you whether you can or can't. I can give you some input on that, but I'm not going to tell you yes or no. I'm going to say, go get a driving eval.
Yeah, and it really depends. It depends where you live, and it depends, what the routes are. But yeah, so we don't have to get too far down into driving, but I think that's important, and I think that the capacity to get these tests are important. Polly, we have a lot of conversations in the chat, and I'm only able to see some of it. So, can you help us with what we should be answering? What Mark's next question might be, or answer?
Absolutely. they're a little different from what we've been talking about, but related. We had some that were emailed in ahead of today. So here we go. Mark, Marion wants to know, how do I deal with my husband's adamant refusal to wear either pads in his underpants or adult garments, incontinence garments? Due to prostate surgery, he is incontinent most of the time, and he cannot walk quickly enough to the toilet from his wheelchair or the bed. He does have cognition changes. I'm finding this really difficult and would appreciate any suggestions on how to proceed.
Yeah, again, that's another tough one. I think the general philosophy is very similar to how you would approach someone who's resistant to driving changes, and that is coming from a place of compassion and care. I think that's the best start to all of these conversations. These are difficult conversations. These are not easy things to have. This is an adult. This is somebody who's an adult and has autonomy, and we have to be able to respect that. And they should be able to largely make their own decisions in life and what they want, until they get to a certain point of cognitive impairment, in which maybe they can't. But let's assume that this is someone who is experiencing incontinence and doesn't want to wear the pads. I would want to understand why that is. Is it embarrassment? Is it fear? Is it the feeling that he or she can't take care of himself, and that's why they don't want to wear these? I think getting at the root cause of what that is and providing a very compassionate sort of response to, I understand that. I totally sympathize with that. I get that. And that I would feel that way too. Let's talk about what the issues are. And if it's about the mess, the cleanup, the possibility of infection, if it's about other issues, those need to be communicated clearly to the person in order so that they understand where your motivations are coming from. And I think that those important conversations, they always need to be done with care and compassion. And if you can do that and set that stage and it's genuine, I think that really gives you the best opportunity to have these conversations. This is a terrible term, but we call this non-compliant behavior, which is basically meaning you've got what you think is the best route of care for your person with Parkinson's, and they're not letting you do it. And so in the health field, we call this non-compliant. It sounds terrible, but it's the best way to describe what's going on. And these are some of the most challenging things to deal with. They really, really are difficult conversations. But I think if you come from a place of caring, that's the best ground to start from. I don't know. You've lived this experience. How do you deal with this?
Well, I don't think we need to spend a ton of time on that, but I also want to say that there are other options. Somebody talks about a confidence clip in the chat. That's Pamela. Thank you for recommending that. There's also, when they're sleeping, they could try, there's condom catheters. There's other options to stay dry. I mean, one of the things that's happening here is that the person with Parkinson's is adding work to the care partner's life because they're most likely doing the cleanup. The embarrassment is maybe on both sides if they're out in public, but there's also just, the fact is, if he has to hurry so much to go to the bathroom, it's then a danger risk too, right? So you can use safety as part of your pitch when you're trying to get them to listen to you and understand the complexity, and sort of the whole global picture of why this is a problem, right? And so I think that's important. Yeah, Gail.
Connie, the word condom catheter sort of scares everyone because it's nothing goes internal. It's just like a rubber that a person would use if person doesn't want to get pregnant. And there's a tube that attached to the tip so that the person can just urinate at will. Yeah. I know your person with Parkinson's needs to get to a certain stage that would be appropriate. But for me, it was a lifesaver, and for my husband, because he no longer had the urge to get out of bed. And even with all the urinals lined up, even that didn't work. So though the word catheter is there, it's just there's nothing internal.
Yeah, and Gail, so people can write that down and look it up later. But they're also available in small enough sizes that the bladder is small enough it actually attaches around the ankle to collect the fluid. And so if you're out and about, you can keep it hidden under slacks And unfortunately, they don't have an equally easy option for women there, but for the men, it is a decent option, and it's probably more comfortable. It doesn't sound like it, but it probably is. But let's move on, Polly, to another
Okay,
question.
super.
And thanks, Gail, for adding that, because that's important.
Yeah. Kathy writes to us and said, when my person with Parkinson's asks me about something that we've already discussed, sometimes more than once, how do I respond to this? I don't want to make him feel bad, but I find it very frustrating having to repeat myself. He's included in all decision making, but relies on me for the medical aspect. I'm trying to be patient. My husband was diagnosed 8 months ago.
Well, I could start, but I'd love to hear other thoughts as well. So this is going to be difficult because they're not aware that they're forgetting and they're asking. So this is where it requires patience from the care partner in order to realize that that this might be a very annoying behavior and that you feel annoyed by that. And it's important not to, shove that away or say, I'm not going to, deal with that emotion. You need to deal with that because it is in fact annoying and you're experiencing it as an annoying behavior. But you have to realize that it's not coming from the purpose of annoying you or doing things in order to get you to react. That this person is suffering from a memory problem. This is really a brain problem that's happening, and you happen to be the end of it, and you happen to be the person getting the repetitive questions, and it can be difficult. The best thing is not to react. You don't want to react to that. You don't want to get angry and snap at them and say, I've already told you this, stop asking me those questions. You want to try and be as patient as possible. If you cannot in that moment be that patient person that situation requires, remove yourself from the situation. Get yourself under control. Take a few deep breaths, like we did earlier in the discussion in the beginning of the talk today. Get yourself under control, and then go back and back at the situation. I can't handle this right now. I need to step out of the room. I'll be back in 30 seconds or a minute or something. I hate to say it, but these behavioral interventions are very, very similar to when you deal with difficult problems with other people, not just your person with Parkinson's disease. Think of how you deal with, children that are annoying you or other people that are annoying in your life. Remove yourself, try and be patient. But this is, obviously with your person with Parkinson's, this is someone that you want to be there for and you want to be caring for them. So you can't totally go away, but you do need to step out for a moment, get yourself under control and come back.
And I think this is, again, sometimes you just have to write things down, keeping a board,
Yes.
keeping a notepad. I know, Gail, you did that a lot with Gene toward the end, especially. He had Lewy body dementia, and you've talked about that, where you just had to write things down, keep them written down, and just know he might ask you again. But you can point to the notepad instead of having to say it again,
Right.
or to a whiteboard that you keep in a prominent location. So I think that's a good
Right.
solution.
Every time he sat down at the beginning of the day for breakfast, there was a pad with all the things that I was doing or that we were doing together, or all appointments. And when he would ask me, I said, go look at the paper. It's right there.
Yeah.
And that would save him the embarrassment of having to bother me again.
Yeah.
He can just sneak a look at it and get the answer and not having to ask.
Yeah, I love that. And I also love the stepping away, removing yourself from the situation. Don't forget that piece of advice. That is such a great piece of advice. It's whenever we feel aggravated, our best move is to just step back. And it's not just with our person, as you point out, Mark. It happens daily with, a lot of interactions. So just take that breath, that calming breath, and just understand where the trouble's coming from and try to lift it off your shoulders. It'll at least help you be a healthier person. Yeah, Gail.
Every time I go to these meetups, I find that I didn't behave the way we hear you guys talking. I didn't. And that's a thing that I just, as a widow, there's a lot of guilt, and it's really, really unfortunate because we always remember the bad things. But I've had every one of these problems that I had to deal with, and it's really hard, especially at the beginning when you're not quite sure what's happening. And you say, I told her that. How can you remember when you have your golf game, but you can't remember this thing we talked about? And I've mentioned it 100 times. So these are things that stick with me. It's going to stick with you guys too. But think about the thousands of things you do every single day that you do without losing your cool.
Yeah. Thank you, Gail. Wise words. Polly?
Yeah. Mark, Deanna asks, are there advantages or disadvantages to having an official dementia diagnosis? And perhaps you might define dementia again for this crowd, since it's a scary word for a lot of folks.
Yeah, that's a great question. So what's the value of actually knowing if you have it, if you meet criteria for dementia or not? Well, dementia is a technical term for a change in thinking or behavior which impacts your daily function. So you can consider a lot of different things that would impact your daily thinking and cognition that impacts daily function. So there are a lot of things that qualify as dementias, but what we're talking about here is an irreversible dementia or a neurodegenerative dementia, something that progresses and gets worse over time, and we don't really know how to slow it down or stop it, and certainly not reverse it. That's different from the sorts of thinking problems that you might have that affect your behavior and daily function due to, for example, heat stroke. That can be changed around or reversed. There are certain metabolic conditions. If you're low on vitamin B12, you can get a shot of B12. Your memory problems turn around and they go away. Those are reversible dementias. So what we're talking about here is an irreversible dementia associated with Parkinson's disease. There are also other kinds of dementias associated with Alzheimer's disease or Huntington's disease or dementia with Lewy bodies and so forth. So there are lots of different causes of dementias, but the general diagnosis of a dementia is a change in behavior or cognition that impacts your ability to live your life the way you want to. So is there a reason why you would want to know this? Well, I can say yes. I think that most people would want to know this, but believe it or not, there are some people out there that really don't know, that think, you can't change this for me. Why would I want to know this? And I think that that's a kind of philosophical question. And I think it comes down to whether you feel like having knowledge is power, and this allows you to live your life the way that you want because you know that what you can expect in the future, versus you're just going to leave it up to, the fates and you're going to take what comes. I think there are different philosophies and different people have different approaches to this. Personally, I think, because I'm a neuropsychologist that specializes in dementia, that it's of value to know that information so that you can have planning. You can talk about long-term care. You can talk about financial decisions. You can talk about how you wish the end of your life to wrap up. Different sorts of things that you can come together and start making plans for those, how you want your children involved or not involved, all of these different sorts of things. And if you know that you have this condition and you know generally how it's going to progress, you can make those decisions and have input on those. If you say this is the fate and I'm just going to go with the flow, then you kind of don't know. And then so your agency over that part of your life is going to be reduced. So I think it's a philosophical question for most people, but it's worth having that discussion with your person with Parkinson's disease to understand, because you may feel like that person and their wishes, and it may turn out that they feel differently. I think it's a good conversation to have.
And it's such an important topic, just to understand that. I think I see it, I would say it's 100%, but science may disagree with me, but that 100% of people with Parkinson's have cognitive challenges, not the least of which is caused by a lack of sleep. None of us do as well when we haven't slept well, and most of our people with Parkinson's sleep horribly. And so, there's different reasons for the kinds of dementia that they do have. Mark, I think, is some of what you're saying, and some of it can be treated and some can't. And there is, I think that I would advocate for people to know versus not know, because it really helps inform care and inform the choices in care, and to help you increase the safe environment, and also increase the trust between you and your care team as well as your person with Parkinson's. That this has got to be a circle of trust. We need to be honest with each other. It doesn't help to hold things back. And you can still live really well with differing levels of dementia. We just need to restrict the decisions you get to make, or they need to be, really well thought through. And sometimes that person just can't do that. And so that puts more of an onus on us as the care partner, but that's just the way it is. And it's a big part of living with a person with Parkinson's who's probably going to have the disease for a very long time. And some of you are listening that are with someone who's newly diagnosed. And, this is hard to hear, but it is part of, living well with Parkinson's is understanding what we're working with. I was going to say what we're up against, but let's not say it that way. What we're working with, and I think several people in the chat too, Polly, have asked about, doctors who seem indifferent. Yeah. And I just have to say that there are many, many, many doctors who are not indifferent, and you need to find ones that care, because the ones that really care and know how to practice well are the ones who say, let's look at this and let's find let's change, let's manage the disease, let's make some changes that might help. I don't think you want someone who says, well, good luck with that. See you in a year. That's not going to be helpful for you or your person with Parkinson's. It is a disease of management. Go ahead, Gail.
I know this, that a person who has never been a caregiver has no idea what it's like. A friend of mine, her husband just had to have quadruple bypass. And I mean, she's just sailed through life for a long, long time. Her husband is like close to 80 and never had to do anything. Well, all of a sudden she says, this is really tough. I don't have a second to myself. I can't get out of the house. I had no idea. Mm-hmm. So up until this point, I don't think she would have been a good person to confess to what you're going through. But boy, if you said something to her now, she'd say, wow, I know what you're saying. Yeah. So be aware that there's no one else but other care partners that can walk in your shoes.
Yeah, and it's another reason to seek out, the kind of people that understand what you're going through, and understand when people don't. Just understand it. They just can't. And I get a little tinge of jealousy when I hear that someone has sailed till the age of 80 with very few health complications. Wow.
And it doesn't take more than a second, or it could be a second difference whether you become a happy-go-lucky person or all of a sudden you're in a caretaker role. Yeah. So it's it's all precarious for everyone, but make sure that if you're speaking to someone with your problems, speak to someone who's had some experience, because there's nothing like hands-on, unfortunately.
Yeah. Holly?
Yeah. Karen, who just lost her husband this summer, would love to talk about guilt and loss. She also asks, what does it really mean when someone dies of Parkinson's and not with Parkinson's?
I think if someone dies with Parkinson's, that means that maybe something else took that individual, and you can say, yeah, we beat Parkinson's. I mean, that's about all you can do. I know someone who had his Parkinson's advanced, but so did his heart disease, and the heart disease took him. So I guess you could say he died with Parkinson's. But if they die from Parkinson's, what can I say? They're still gone. My husband died from Parkinson's. He was an otherwise healthy individual up to the last second, except the ravages of Parkinson's on his brain that stopped him from being able to function.
Thank you for that, Gail. And I agree that the distinction may not be necessary, but but we have lately been talking more about the fact that Parkinson's is a killer. It is the number 10. I think Dr. Benzie Kluger, who's a movement disorder specialist out of Rochester told us that it is the 10th cause of death in the United States. So it is a leading cause of death. When you're first diagnosed, the doctor does like to say, you will not die from this, but it will add complexity and complication to your health profile. And many people with Parkinson's, as it advances, die from pneumonia because of aspiration. And this is because of the changes that occur with Parkinson's. But maybe at the end of the day, you might say they died of pneumonia, not Parkinson's. That's not true. So that's a hard conversation to have. And we just had it recently in front of a couple hundred people where we asked Dr. Kluger to walk us through what it's like, end of life. And it was hard to hear, but people wanted to have a better understanding of it. And I think that we all just need to be realistic that it's a life-taking disease, but you will live with. My husband's lived with Parkinson's for 25 years, and we have been managing it for 25 years. And so, he's an example of how well one could live with good management, and also because he was diagnosed so young, he was 40. But also to say that it is a challenging and confounding disease for all of us, and we just need to be realistic about it. And I think we all share grief in the knowledge that this is a life-taking disease. And but as Benzie would say, with some humor, as far as he knows, all of us will die.
100% mortality rate.
100% mortality rate. And so we all know that. We're just trying to live the best we can in the moment. So, Mark, do you have any thoughts about grief? Or do people come in with you that are grief-stricken, that can't, just with the diagnosis itself or with the losses that they're experiencing? Is that such a thing?
Yeah, I think that's probably the best way to describe the general feeling that people come in with when they at least are initially diagnosed, this sense of loss. I think that's a good way to describe it. And it's loss of independence, it's loss of function, it's loss of control, this general sense of not being this person who was independent as before, and now this disease will start slowly eroding that sense of competency and capacity, and it becomes this feeling of loss. And I think that in turn leads to grief, and mourning that loss is grief. So these are all things that are joined together. But I think it's the resolution of those things relies on you openly facing them. And probably the worst thing that you can do, and everybody's different, and people have different ways of dealing with things, but one of the best things you can do is to sit down and sort of put that on the table in front of you with a trusted person, whether that's your spouse, whether it's a child, whether it's a friend, somebody who you can feel safe with, and just talk about those raw emotions and what that means to you. It's a really super hard exercise to do. It's not an easy thing to do. And it doesn't happen in a 1-hour session with somebody. This could be, somebody you pay as a licensed clinical social worker or a psychologist or psychiatrist or your internist or somebody you trust that you can really have this conversation. But it also has to be a number of conversations probably in order to deal with how you're going to cope and what this next phase of your life is going to be about. So yeah, I would say loss, grief, these are all things that come into play, and these are steps that you must go through in order to get through this transition.
Yeah, that's helpful, and I think we all need to come to grips with it a little bit sometimes.
Yeah.
And just and hopefully in a place of, again, coming from a place of compassion and love, and it's frustrating a lot of the times, but it's also, the love is still there. Polly?
Yeah, Michael asks us, his wife has had Parkinson's for 15 years. And he said, how can I plan for her care for the next year to 5? Any thoughts on the planning for what comes next?
I want to ask Mark something before we get into that. And that is, does it help does it help our minds to know, like, this is the hard part about Parkinson's. We don't know when it's going to turn and progress more quickly. And does it help to know it will progress quickly? Or does it, how does that, do you know what I'm asking? I don't even know if I'm asking it well, but it's just this notion of sometime we can't plan, right? I guess that's what I'm thinking. I want to give Michael a better answer than that, but I also think it's hard to plan.
Yeah, I think that it revolves around education. I mean, all of you that are on this call today are educating yourself. You're getting support from people who are going through similar experiences. I think knowing more and reading and understanding what the progression will look like for most people, but you're talking about averages. You're talking about group means. So we're not talking about your person with Parkinson's. We're talking about people with Parkinson's in general progress at this sort of a rate, and this starts to happen within 5 years. So these are averages in general with large standard deviations around them. So when we're talking about an individual person, we're not at a point yet where we can tell you about your person with Parkinson's. So it's a bit of a guessing game, and you have to kind of go by the guidelines that we know about groups of people with Parkinson's. For example, women with Parkinson's progress slightly differently than men do. Older people progress slightly faster than younger people. So you can have a 20-year history in somebody who was diagnosed at age 40. You don't see a 20-year history in an 80-year-old who's diagnosed. So there are different guidelines that you can go by that can help guide you, but there's no straight up one way. Here's how you deal with this, and here's how you actually plan. I wish there was. I wish that there was. And the whole field in medicine is moving towards this notion of personalized care or personalized medicine, wherein we can advise you on a particular individual. So not just group averages anymore, but based on your individual biology and genetics and physiology and environmental exposures, we can say, okay, for you, here's what we think is going to happen. So we're moving into that era. We're not there yet. And hopefully we'll be there to help people. But, right now you kind of got to go by the guidelines. So I would say educate yourself, read. I'll give another shameless plug for the Davis Phinney Foundation, of course. They've got great resources and tools. Every Victory Counts, the manual, the website, all of these things. These are, things that are provided at no cost to you. Go out and get them, order them, go to the website. They're really, really important pieces of information for you to make decisions like this.
I wanted to say something that when you read about Parkinson's, you might sit down for 2-3 hours and read about all these different symptoms, but you have to remember that this is going to go over a period of 15, 17 years. So you're not going to be handling everything all at once. And as you go on, everything becomes a new normal. It's not the kind of normal you wanted, but you do get used to it, and it does become part of your day. So for the newly diagnosed, don't think that everything's going to be like that. They turned on a waterfall, and all of a sudden everything's falling on your head. It isn't that way, and you've got to take it slowly. And again, every person is different. Totally different. And that's what I've really learned. And that's the most amazing thing about this disease.
Yeah. Hey, Pat, I have a question for you because
Okay.
you're employed and you have juggled. A lot of people don't know how you have juggled your employment over the years. I wonder if you could just give us a brief snapshot of that, because I think that's also something that helped you plan. You kind of took a pretty aggressive stance of how am I going to live with this disease and keep working and yet be there for Sid, for your wife. Maybe just a couple minutes on that.
Okay. Thank you. My background is in advertising and radio and television, and when Sydney started showing symptoms, we realized, and then once she was finally diagnosed, it took 4 years to be diagnosed, but once she was finally diagnosed, it was clear that I needed to remove some stress out of my life to not so that I won't take it home and make things worse with the Parkinson's, but so I became a life insurance retirement planner for school teachers, because my wife was a school teacher, and she met somebody that was doing that, and so I went and did that. Not the most money making scenario, but it got me involved in the schools. Sydney she finally needed to retire, and we needed to maintain her insurance. So at the time I said, okay, I'll dive in, and I went and became a school teacher. I went to UNLV here in Las Vegas and received a master's in special education. So when Sydney's insurance ended, that very next day mine began. It was the way it was amazing how it timed out. But and so I've changed that over the time
and I think that's an important lesson here too. If you're young and if you're still working, and if there's some way you can change, your work that will help to benefit, your current situation, maybe you have time to look at that. Many people, when they're diagnosed with Parkinson's, are older, and so they're already retired, and it's a different situation. And you're hopefully on, have good Medicare coverage, and so but Pat, I think you made decisions that were very forward thinking, and so sometimes we're called to do that, and other times we're called to sit back and sort of reassess and maybe reduce our goals a little bit so that we can be a little more present in the situation, because we don't know what's coming. And we're seeing that in the chat. Some people, everybody has a different experience with Parkinson's, and I do think that there are many common threads that we'll all experience together at some point.
Every morning I go over with Sydney what's going on today, and knowing what's going on today doesn't mean it's going to be what's happening when I get home. I mean, everything can be changed, and so I have to be ready for that, and so on. And it's not always easy, but one of the things that Sydney came up with, her mantra early on was to plan for the future but live for today, to have hopes and dreams continue, but to know that what can I do today to live well and make my life as best as I can with my disease. What she's doing right now, kind of with dealing with grief, we've dealt with a lot of emotions on things that we can't do anymore. I got to say, Connie, she and I watched the 1986 and 1988 course classic over the weekend, and you did a really good job. But and Davis did an amazing job. He won the 1988. But those are things that we could do that we can't do now. And Sydney has done all these things that she could do, and now she can't, or are difficult for her. And so what she's doing is she's making a book of pictures and writing down all the things that she was able to do, and taking pictures and things that she did do when she was able. And
I hope you don't mind me saying this, but I also know that she danced at her daughter's wedding.
She did.
And she didn't think she could, and your daughter dragged her out there. She dragged.
We just had the wedding this weekend, and we took her wheelchair, because in Sydney's programming with her DBS, one program keeps her less anxious, but not able to have movement. She's not able to get up and walk safely. The other program will take away the anxiety. But it creates anxiety, but she's able to walk and move around. So we took the wheelchairs thinking that we're going to be in that program A mode most of the time. But once they got dancing, she had to switch it and get up and go, and she can still do it. And
I love it. That's a really hopeful message right there. And, we're coming really hard up against the end. I don't know if we want to ask another question, Polly, or if we want to see if Mark has some thoughts to add. What do you think?
See if, because some of the other questions are big. So
okay, and we'll try to answer these questions in the future, and we will send you afterward all the links. Will be posted online if you didn't get all of them. And everything that you ask in here helps inform us for the next time. And luckily, we're able to corral Mark and get him back here somewhat frequently on the regular. But Mark, drawing all these things together and seeing some of the questions that you've seen in the chat and some of the things you've answered, some thoughts?
Yeah, I think in this particular session, we've tapped into, I think, some deep issues. And I think around tough conversations that need to be had. How you deal with behaviors, particularly around driving, wearing the incontinence pads. How do you go and provide the best care for your person with Parkinson's disease and not burn yourself out? And I think that comes back to something that you've all experienced as care partners, that you do need to take care of yourself. And this is something that we come back. It's sort of, a common theme on this chat is talking about care partners taking care of themselves and being sure to allow time for that. Because these are tough emotional issues that are challenging in the best of times. And to have them with your person with Parkinson's disease, I think that it can create a very stressful situation. I think it's important to always come from a care of compassion and love and trying to understand and listen more than speaking. That sort of thing is really important. But it's also important for your care partner to take care of yourself. That whole notion about stepping away when you feel frustrated, go out and take a walk when you get some time, if you can leave them alone for a little bit. I think all of those things are really important, because the better you are, the better you can be for your person with Parkinson's disease.
Yeah. I think also staying social, a lot of this is, is building your community. And some of those people now will be people with Parkinson's and their care partners, and that will really help you. It seems daunting at first, especially if you go to a care partner meetup or a person, people with Parkinson's support group. It's like, oh, I don't want to be here. But guess what? You're going to meet some of your best friends there and some of your best allies, and people that will just give you some tricks, so-called tricks of the trade, I think, to help navigate. And I want to thank everyone for being here. I really want to thank Mark for taking the extra time to join us 2 months in a row. Your expertise and your calm wisdom, your lived experience, your studied experience, and just being there for us and being really present is so helpful. And we all wish you were in our backyards, but at least you're here. Thank you so much.
Anytime, guys.
Yeah, so appreciate it. And Gail and Pat, taking this time and giving so much. They're available. You can reach them on the foundation website through our ambassador program. And Polly, you don't have to be here either. You're the executive director of the foundation. You have a lot of responsibility, but you keep joining us and help guide our conversations. And I know it informs you, but we need you as well. So thanks so much. And come back. See us next month. We'll be back on October
7th.
All right. And I think on October 7th, we're actually having an occupational therapist with us. So we're gonna talk some more detail here, and I think that's going to be helpful as well. We have great experts here. Thanks again, Mark.
You got it.
Showing up. That's the first step. Thank you.
See you in a month.
Bye, guys.
Bye.